Picture this. It's early 1610. You are standing at the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, but something is wrong. Every breath feels like a struggle, a shallow, desperate reach for oxygen that isn't there. At 7,000 feet above sea level, the air isn't just thin, it's a cold, sharp blade that smells of crushed piñon resin, sun-baked red clay, and the distant, metallic promise of snow. Before you stands a man whose face is a map of exhaustion and iron-willed survival, Don Pedro de Peralta. Behind him, a ragged procession of only 12 weary soldiers and 8 Franciscan friars. They haven't come here on a victory march. They have come here because they have nowhere else to go. Just a few years earlier, the Spanish crown was ready to wash its hands of this entire, worthless wilderness. The previous capital at San Gabriel was a disaster, a place of starvation, bitter drought, and the lingering stench of a failed administration. The king had signed a formal recommendation to abandon New Mexico entirely. The only thing that stopped the retreat was a report of 7,000 baptized souls that the church refused to leave behind. So, Peralta was sent north with a final, desperate mandate. Find a site that can actually survive. He chose this high desert thunglung, Santa Fe, not for its beauty, but for its defense and its ample water. But as the first wooden crosses are hammered into the rocky soil, a question hangs in the frigid mountain air. What kind of spirit does it take to build a holy city in a place that feels closer to the sky than the earth? And who was already watching from the shadows of these mountains, masters of a landscape the Europeans were only beginning to fear? To find the answer, we have to look down past the Spanish boots and into the very dust of the ancestors. Look down. Beneath the pristine flagstones of the modern Santa Fe Plaza, past the souvenir shops and the high-end galleries, lies a world built of mud and memory. Long before the first Spanish spurred their horses into this valley, this was a landscape of silent architects. Forget the primitive labels you might find in dusty 19th century textbooks. By 900 AD, the ancestors of the Oke-Owingeh, Tesuque, and Pojoaque peoples had already decoded the secrets of this high-altitude labyrinth. They weren't just surviving, they were engineering a civilization. As you walk through the ghost of a 1,000-year-old village, the first thing you notice isn't the forest, it's the adobe. You see contiguous walled villages, multi-story complexes that rose from the earth like natural extensions of the cliffs. The air here doesn't taste of iron or rust. It's a fragrant mix of charred cedar, the sweet, nutty aroma of roasted blue corn, and the earthy dampness of freshly turned soil. Listen closely. You don't hear the clash of steel, but the rhythmic, hypnotic scrape, scrape, scrape of stone manos against metates, grinding corn into life-giving meal. You hear the murmur of prayers rising from Kiva's circular, underground ceremonial chambers where the spiritual and physical worlds collided. These people were masters of the miracle of the 3 sisters: corn, beans, and squash. They built sophisticated irrigation systems that coaxed life from a land that seemed determined to remain a desert. They were a society of deep roots and celestial alignment, where every wall was a testament to a dozen centuries of belonging. But by 1425, something shifted. The villages fell silent, the hearths went cold. A thriving culture that had dominated this valley for 500 years simply vanished, leaving only their adobe bones behind. What happened? Was it the creeping cold of a mini ice age, or a rising water table that flooded their sanctuaries? And how did this abandoned sacred ground become the catalyst for the bloodiest cultural collision in the American West? To understand that, we have to wait for the arrival of the knots and the knives. Imagine the sound of silence, not the peaceful quiet of a mountain morning, but a heavy, suffocating silence shared by thousands of people across hundreds of miles. In the summer of 1680, The Spanish in Santa Fe felt it, but they couldn't decode it. They didn't see the runners moving like shadows between the villages, clutching a secret that would change the map of North America. Inside their hands was the most dangerous weapon of the 17th century, a simple length of knotted deerskin thong. For decades, the air in Santa Fe had been thick with the smell of burning traditional masks and the sharp, metallic tang of the Spanish lash. The Franciscan friars had moved beyond baptism to the systematic destruction of the Pueblo soul, banning their dances, raiding their kivas, and hanging their medicine men. One of those men was a leader from San Juan Pueblo named Pope. He didn't just want survival, he wanted a purge. The knots in the string were a countdown. Each day, the village leaders would untie one knot. When the last knot was gone, the world would explode. It happened on August 10. The rhythmic thump-thump of Spanish church bells was suddenly drowned out by a deafening, unified war cry. From the peaks of the Sangre de Cristos to the depths of the Rio Grande Valley, 19 different pueblos, speaking different languages but sharing a single rage, rose as one. By the time the news reached Santa Fe, the frontier was already a graveyard. Over 400 Spaniards were dead, including 21 friars whose mission of peace had ended in fire. In Santa Fe, nearly 2,500 Pueblo warriors surrounded the city. They didn't need to storm the palace of the governors. They did something much more surgical. They cut the water supply. Imagine the atmosphere inside the palace. 1,000 terrified Spanish settlers huddling in the dark, gasping in the heat as their shallow wells ran dry. The air was a choking fog of black powder smoke and the smell of dying livestock. After 11 days of agony, the masters of New Mexico were forced to do the unthinkable. They abandoned their holy city and fled south toward El Paso in a long, humiliating line of defeat. For 12 years, the cross was gone. The kivas were reopened. The Spanish steel was a memory. But how does an empire handle being the only European power ever to be evicted from its own colony? And what happened when the shadows of the past finally caught up with the people of the high desert? To find that out, we have to look at the woman of wood who led a bloodless return. Picture a different kind of army. It is September 1692, and the mountain passes are alive again with the rhythmic clink, clink, clink of Spanish spurs and the heavy rhythmic thud of war horses. But at the head of this column, Don Diego de Vargas isn't brandishing a sword. Instead, he holds aloft a small, serene wooden statue, La Conquistadora, Our Lady of Peace. After 12 years in exile, the Spanish were back to reclaim their holy faith. The scene at the Santa Fe Plaza that morning was a masterpiece of political theater. De Vargas stood before the Pueblo leaders, who had occupied the old Spanish buildings for over a decade. The air was thin and crisp, smelling of burning cedar and the faint, sweet scent of church incense that hadn't been smelled in these parts for a generation. Official history books love this moment. They call it the bloodless reconquest. They tell the story of a peaceful negotiation, a miraculous return where the Pueblo people simply lowered their spears and accepted the Spanish cross once again. It's a beautiful story, one that Santa Fe still celebrates every year. But look closer. Step behind the velvet curtains of the official narrative. The peace of 1692 was a fragile, desperate gamble. When de Vargas returned a year later with hundreds of settlers in 1693, the peace evaporated like desert rain. The Puebloans weren't ready to give up their homes again. The ensuing battle for Santa Fe was a nightmare of hand-to-hand combat in the narrow Adobe streets. When the smoke cleared, de Vargas ordered the execution of 70 Pueblo leaders right there in the plaza and sentenced 400 women and children to slavery. The bloodless return was actually bought in bone and iron. The Spanish had learned a bitter lesson, though. To survive here, they could no longer rule with an iron fist. They stopped the forced labor. They turned a blind eye to the secret kivas. A new, syncretic world was being born, a blend of Spanish blood and Pueblo soul. But as the 18th century faded, a new sound began to echo from the horizon, not the sound of horses, but the scream of dry wooden axles. A new empire was coming from the east, and they weren't bringing crosses, they were bringing cargo. How did a dusty, isolated fortress transform into the most valuable port in the middle of a desert? Close your eyes and inhale. The air has changed. It's no longer just the scent of pinon smoke or the damp earth of a kiva. It is 1,821, and the mountain breeze is now carrying a thick, choking veil of yellow dust, the pungent smell of sweaty pack mules, and the sharp, fermented tang of pass wine from the El Paso Valley. The sound you hear isn't the prayer of a friar or the war cry of a warrior. It is a sound that signals the end of an era, the high-pitched, bone-jarring scream of dry wooden axles complaining against the desert heat. For over 2 centuries, Santa Fe had been a locked box. The Spanish crown, obsessed with mercantilism, had forbidden any trade with the outside world. To the American merchants in the East, Santa Fe was a myth, a city of gold and silver sitting just out of reach across 1,000 miles of grass and buffalo. Then, in a flash of history, the red and gold flag of Spain was lowered, and the eagle of independent Mexico was raised. The gates were finally thrown open. In November 1821, a man named William Becknell and a small crew of Missouri traders limped into the Santa Fe Plaza. They were half-starved and exhausted, but their pack horses were heavy with calico, silk, and iron tools. They didn't just find a market, they found a revolution. The goods they sold for pennies in Missouri were bought for silver in Santa Fe. The Santa Fe Trail was born America's first truly international highway. Suddenly, this isolated mountain outpost became a global port. The plaza was a sensory explosion. The rhythmic clop-clop of heavy freight wagons, the shouting of traders in English, Spanish, and French, and the rustle of imported silk against sun-baked adobe walls. But as the silver flowed in, the old social order began to crack. While the merchants grew fat on trade, the local villagers and Puebloans felt the weight of new taxes and a distant government in Mexico City that didn't understand their mountains. A storm was brewing in the north, led not by an empire, but by a hunter. How did a simple man of the earth end up sitting in the governor's chair, and why did his reign end in a brutal execution that still haunts the soil of Santa Fe? Picture this. It's August 1837. The mountain air, usually so crisp and clean, is now heavy with the heavy, metallic scent of spilled blood and the acrid, stinging smoke of black powder muskets. You are standing just outside the gates of Santa Fe, but the men marching toward you aren't the polished, velvet-clad soldiers of a distant empire. They are the rancheros and puebloanos, hard-handed men with dirt under their fingernails and a centuries-old rage in their hearts. The Santa Fe Trail had brought silver and silk to the merchants, but it had brought nothing but misery to the mountain villagers. A new constitution from Mexico City had stripped away their local rights, and a new, arrogant governor named Albino Perez had arrived to squeeze taxes from a people who had nothing left to give. The air in the north began to vibrate with a different frequency, the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of 1,000 moccasins and boots marching in unison. This was the Rio Arriba Rebellion. Governor Perez tried to flee, but the wilderness he sought to rule finally swallowed him. In a brutal display of frontier fury, he was intercepted and executed just miles from the plaza. Imagine the sensory shock of that afternoon. The sight of the governor's head being carried back to the city, and the terrifying silence that fell over the elite as the mountain rabble took over the capital. But what happened next is what truly stunned the world. For the first and only time in the history of New Mexico, a common man, a buffalo hunter from Taos named Jose Gonzalez, was installed in the palace of the governors. A man with indigenous blood and a hunter's soul was now sitting in the seat of Spanish kings. His reign was short, ending before a firing squad just months later, but the message was carved into the very adobe of the city. Santa Fe belonged to those who were made of its soil. Yet, as the smoke of the rebellion cleared, a question remained. How did this city, built of nothing but sun-dried earth, survive the fires of so many revolutions? What was the secret to the walls that refused to crumble? To find that, we have to touch the miracle material that makes Santa Fe immortal. Reach out and touch the wall. It doesn't feel like the cold, indifferent stone of a European cathedral or the sterile glass of a modern skyscraper. Instead, it feels alive, radiating a soft, deep warmth that seems to pulse with the rhythm of the sun itself. This is adobe. In most parts of the world, mud is just something you wash off your boots. But in Santa Fe, it is the miracle material that made the city immortal. If the high desert mountains were the city's fortress, then adobe was its skin. Look at the Palace of the Governors, stretching along the north side of the plaza. It has stood here since 1610, making it the oldest continuously occupied public building in the United States. It hasn't survived through brute strength, but through flexibility. Adobe is a simple alchemy of clay-heavy earth, water, and straw, baked into bricks by the unforgiving New Mexico sun. But the magic is in its breath. On a mid-August afternoon, when the high-altitude sun is screaming at the earth, the thick adobe walls act as a thermal sponge, swallowing the heat and keeping the interior as cool as a mountain cave. At night, when the temperature plunges, the walls release that stored warmth back into the rooms. The air inside an ancient Santa Fe home has a specific, unmistakable quality. It's silent, heavy, and smells faintly of damp earth and old wood. The Spanish arrived wanting to build stone cities like those in Castile, but the land refused them. They had to learn the Puebloan way to build with the ground, not against it. This isn't just architecture, it's a philosophy of belonging. It's why Santa Fe is known today as the city different. But as the 19th century drew to a close, a new kind of miracle arrived not made of mud, but of iron and steam. The world was coming to Santa Fe, but they weren't looking for trade or territory. They were looking for a light that didn't exist anywhere else on Earth. How did a dusty, crumbling adobe town transform into the most famous art colony in the West? Inhale deeply. The air has shifted again. It's no longer just the smell of damp adobe or the heavy musk of freight mules. It is 1,880, and the high desert breeze is suddenly sharp with the smell of coal smoke, hot iron, and a new, intoxicating aroma, turpentine, and fresh oil paint. The sound you hear isn't the scream of a wooden axle, but the rhythmic, chest-thumping chug-chug-chug of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway echoing off the canyon walls. But here's the irony. The railroad that bore the city's name didn't actually come into the city. Because of the steep mountain grade, the main line bypassed Santa Fe by 18 miles. For a moment, the holy city was on the verge of becoming a ghost town, an ancient relic forgotten by the industrial age. But Santa Fe didn't die. It rebranded. As you walk down Canyon Road, the sensory shift is total. The harsh, functional light of the frontier has been replaced by a light that artists call divine, a high-altitude, crystalline glow that turns the Sangre de Cristos a bruised purple and makes the adobe walls look like they are cast in gold. Artists like Carlos Vieira and Sheldon Parsons didn't just come to paint, they came to invent an image. They looked at the crumbling buildings and didn't see poverty. They saw Santa Fe style. By 1912, the city's leaders passed a law requiring all new buildings to look old. They were marketing the ancient as a commodity, creating a gilded stage for wealthy tourists from the East. Inside the new galleries, you hear the soft rustle of silk and the refined murmur of art critics. Santa Fe was reborn as the American Riviera of the high desert. But as the champagne flowed and the canvases dried, a new shadow was stretching across the plaza. Behind the colorful turquoise jewelry and the sanitized history, a secret was being buried, a secret so big it would end the world as we knew it. Who was the woman in the nondescript office at 109 East Palace, and why were the world's most dangerous minds hiding in plain sight in this sleepy art colony? Picture this. It is 1943. While the world is consumed by the global fires of World War II, Santa Fe remains a quiet, dusty art colony, or so it seems. Just a half block from the plaza, at 109 East Palace Avenue, sits a nondescript office. There is no sign, no label, only a woman named Dorothy McKibben. The air inside is charged, smelling of fresh ink and high-stakes urgency. Listen to the rhythmic click-clack of her typewriter, a sound that masks the greatest secret of the 20th century. Here, the world's most brilliant physicists, including Robert Oppenheimer, arrived like ghosts. They checked in at this Adobe gatehouse under assumed names before being whisked away to a secret laboratory on the Pajarito Plateau to build the atomic bomb. The irony is breathtaking. Beneath the skin of an ancient Spanish outpost, the most futuristic and terrifying technology in human history was being forged. Santa Fe was no longer just a destination. It was the silent Adobe forge of the atomic age. But as the first test blast illuminated the desert sky, the city faced its final transformation. How does a place of holy faith weave together the ancient mud of the Puebloans, the steel of the conquistadors, and the ghosts of the atomic scientists into one living soul? You lie in your bed as the cool mountain breeze brings relief. Through the open window, you hear the rhythmic tolling of the San Miguel Chapel bells, the oldest in the nation. It is a silver sound, echoing against adobe walls that have seen empires rise and atomic fires ignite. But as you've seen, this story was never just about quiet nights. It is a story of layers of Pueblo grit beneath Spanish stone, of the trade dust that built a nation's commerce, and of an atomic secret that changed the world forever. Santa Fe is not a museum. It is a breathing, living soul that refused to be conquered by drought, revolt, or the weight of time itself. Here, the holy faith isn't just a name. It's the resilience to build a world where the ancient and the futuristic coexist in a fragile, beautiful harmony. You aren't just visiting a city, you are walking through the consequential crossroads of the American spirit. History isn't static. It is the warm mud beneath your feet. Thanks for joining us in this resurrection of Santa Fe. Hit subscribe and tell us, what city should we wake next? History is waiting. See you very soon.